Hello everybody, this is Kirby over yonder, and when a show gets to its 5th season, it runs the risk of becoming a little stale. Some shows just aren't meant to go on this long, and because of this, the writers can start running out of ideas, or take the show in a direction that fans aren't happy with. This isn't to say that every show gets worse at around season 5. In fact, some shows, like Breaking Bad or BoJack Horseman, can get even better. It's just that it's very common for a show to lose its audience at around season 5. See Arrested Development or Rick and Morty as an example. But does season 5 of Adventure Time follow the same pattern? Well, maybe, but before we get into that, we gotta talk about some behind-the-scenes stuff, baby. You see, season 5 is a very long season of Adventure Time. It is 52 episodes, which is double the normal 26 length of the first 4 seasons. You could say that season 5 is actually 2 seasons stitched together, but actually, it kinda is. You see, Pendleton Ward, the creator of Adventure Time, served as showrunner up until around midway through season 5, with Adam Muto, a writer and storyboard artist, taking his place for the rest of the series, including Distant Lands and the upcoming Fiona and Cake spinoff. It's not clear when exactly Ward left, but it seems to be around midway through season 5. And because of that, you can really feel the tone of the show begin to change this season, particularly in its second half. I think one of the more noticeable changes, especially in the back half of the season, is that the characters feel a lot more cold to each other than in the first 4. It's hard to put into words exactly, the show just feels a little less wholesome than it did before. It's more willing to explore the more uncomfortable sides of these characters. It's not really a season in which we get a ton of character growth. That'll be saved for future seasons. Again, season 5 is more about exploring these characters' problems than actually fixing them. But at the same time, it's also a very mundane season of Adventure Time. For whatever reason, season 5 really just fell in love with these mundane slice-of-life stories. Episodes that mostly center around the characters just kinda hanging around. I don't think episodes like this are inherently a bad thing, but I feel like there's a bit of an overabundance of them in season 5. I think the main problem with these types of episodes is that there's just a lack of weight to a lot of these stories, and because of that, there's not really a strong enough reason for me to be invested in them. Like, why should I care about Finn climbing this tree to retrieve a disc, when the episode shows us multiple times that Jade can just stretch up there and get it at literally any point. But of these episodes, the Bods Prince is easily the most egregious. Seriously, I think this thing deserves an award for the most tedious and boring episode of Adventure Time. Of course, I'm not trying to claim that every season 5 episode is like this. It's just a big enough problem to the point where it kinda brings down the season as a whole for me. Back in my season 4 retrospective, I mentioned how that season began to stray away from having every episode take place from Finn and Jake's perspective. But season 5 goes even further with this. We got 2 more Grable's episodes, another Fiona and Cake episode, another BMO episode, another Ice Cane episode, and even our first real Bubblegum episode. But trust me, it doesn't quite end there. We also got Simon and Marcy, our first flashback episode focused on Simon Petrikov and a young Marceline. There's also Mystery Dungeon, an ensemble piece focused on Ice Cane as well as 4 secondary characters. There's Bad Timing, which isn't our first LSP episode, but it is the first to take place entirely from her perspective, without Finn and Jake there to act as audience stand-ins. But most importantly, we got the episodes The Suitor, The Vault, Root Beer Guy, and Lemon Hope. Not only are all of these episodes focused on a character who isn't a part of the main cast, but they're all centered around characters we barely know, if at all. And unlike in Thank You, for most of these episodes, Finn and Jake don't even get a subplot. And trust me when I say that this trend will very much continue into the following season. Season 5 introduced the concept of the show having big season-long arcs, particularly with Lemongrab and Finn and Flame Princess. Unfortunately, however, I don't think either of these arcs were handled particularly well. We'll start with Lemongrab. Before Season 5, Lemongrab only had 2 major appearances, one in Season 3 and one in Season 4. However, in Season 5 he gets upgraded to 4 major appearances, one of which being a 2-parter. He also gets a segment in another 5 more short Graybles. The season tried really hard to build him up as a villain, but to be honest, it doesn't really work for me. As a villain, I can't really take him seriously, and as a comedic character, his shtick kinda gets old when you see him so many times throughout the season. Like, he's great in Mystery Dungeon because of the ways in which he's able to bounce off of the other characters. But by Too Old, we've already seen him so many times, to the point where he just kinda gets grating to watch. Which I get is probably the point, but it just kinda makes the episode a slog to get through. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like Lemongrab should have been a character that only appears once, maybe twice a season, as I find him too weird and goofy to take seriously, but too obnoxious to find consistently funny over the course of 52 episodes. But now we get to Finn's arc in Season 5. I have a lot to say about Finn's arc and portrayal in Season 5, and not very much of it is positive. Before we get into it, I think I'll just start with a quick disclaimer. I don't inherently have anything against Finn being portrayed in a negative light. I think the character is nuanced enough to the point where you can do stuff like that. I just don't think it's executed very well in Frost and Fire. I simply just don't buy that Finn would intentionally manipulate and hurt innocent people for such selfish reasons. Especially not a person he cares about as much as Flame Princess. The way he's written in Frost and Fire and the episodes following it just feels so bafflingly out of character that it kinda leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It doesn't feel like a natural character progression. It just feels like he was written to emotionally regress just for the sake of the plot. And it unfortunately bleeds into Finn's portrayal throughout the rest of Season 5. It's kinda inconsistent actually. Sometimes the show will take Finn's breakup seriously, and then other times it'll just use the fact that Finn's still in love with Flame Princess for cheap jokes. The Red Throne is absolutely insufferable to sit through for this exact reason. And in general, the show just really loved dumbing Finn down for the sake of comedy this season. Like, isn't it hilarious that he's in the same class as Lemonhope? Or that it took him 3 months to get milk? Or that he got so invested in this cat kingdom? Or that he's colorblind? What a weird reveal that was. So yeah, as a whole, I am not a fan of the way Finn is portrayed throughout the back half of Season 5. I can see what they were going for with the breakup arc. There's a good idea in there, but it was not executed well at all in my opinion. The only other important thing to note with Finn this season is that he gets the grass sword. It's really cool, and up there with the demon sword and the Finn sword as one of my favorites. It doesn't really get used that much in Season 5, but trust me when I say it'll be very important for the rest of the series. Okay, I think it's finally about time we move on from Finn and discuss Jake this season. Much like with Season 4, Season 5 was another low-key year for Jake. He mostly just exists to support Finn and otherwise doesn't really get a ton to do. Probably his biggest development this season was the introduction of the pups, though outside of their debut episode, they don't really get much to do this season. We do get to see a bit of Jake's dynamic with Jake Jr. in One Last Job and another 5 more short Graybles, but otherwise, the pups are almost absent from the rest of the season. This is a bit of a side tangent, but I sort of feel like the pups were wasted potential as a whole. I don't know, there was an opportunity for Jake to learn and grow as a character through being a father, but he sorta just stayed the same. And most of the pups themselves don't get enough screen time to be interesting or memorable characters. Something that I find interesting to know is that Jake actually gets pretty quiet throughout the last 7 episodes of the season. Like, his biggest role from Rattleballs onwards is probably helping power the time machine in Betty. He also gets a couple lines in Bad Timing and Billy's Bucket List, but otherwise he may as well not exist throughout this chunk of episodes. Overall, it's not a terrible season for Jake, but it's definitely far from one of his better years. Don't worry though, next season will be a lot nicer to him. Princess Bubblegum generally stayed within the same trajectory her character was being taken in Season 4. Still very morally gray, however, this season leans more into her negative qualities than Season 4 did. But I still really like this portrayal of PB, as it gives her a lot of variety in her appearances. When she shows up in an episode, you never really know what kind of role she's gonna take. She's very flexible in that sense. She also just gets a lot to do this season in general. In the back half especially, it feels like she gets a role in almost every episode. We also got to see a lot of PB's past during the second half of Season 5. We see her first encounter with Flame Princess in Earth and Water. We see her meet Shoko during the early days of the Candy Kingdom in The Vault. And we see how she dealt with the Rattleballs in, well, Rattleballs. Overall, Seasons 4 and 5 do such a great job helping PB come into her own. She's no longer the standard princess archetype and feels so much more like her own character. Season 5 was also a pretty solid year for the Ice King. The season acts as a bit of a turning point for Ice King, as by midway through he actually stops kidnapping princesses. Okay, technically he kidnaps Muscle Princess off-screen in Betty, but that was just done to contrast him against Simon. I kinda consider Parties Over Isla de Senorita to be the unofficial end to the Kidnapping Princesses saga, where he learns, in his weird Ice King way of course, to value himself as an individual over whether or not he's in a romantic relationship. I love that he's basically not even a villain anymore, he's sorta just Finn and Jake's weird old friend. So much so to the point where he even moves in with them, in an arc that I honestly find to be kinda underwhelming. I don't know, like, I really like the idea of Ice King living with Finn and Jake. I think there's a lot of comedic potential there. But aside from the episode Playdate, the show barely did anything with it. Like, he'll pop in a couple times for a joke, but that's about it. I don't know, it's sort of a case of a good idea, meh execution. Season 5 is an interesting season for Marceline. My friend Jakesu considers Seasons 4 through 6 to be the Marceline drought, but while I think that's totally true of Seasons 4 and 6, I don't know about Season 5. She gets 5 major roles this season, which, when you consider the fact that this is a double-length season, is honestly pretty good for her, when you take into account the fact that most seasons only give her 2 or 3 major roles. We also see an alternate universe version of her in Finn the Human. She gets a segment in 5 more short Graybles, as well as a minor role in Time Sandwich. So yeah, this was a pretty decent year for her, better than Season 4 at the very least. Season 5 really emphasizes the relationship between Marceline and the Ice King / Simon. They come up with a Fiona and Cake story together in Bad Little Boy. We get a full flashback episode between them and Simon and Marcy. We also see them play basketball together in the same episode. She and PB go on an adventure to find Hambo and Skywitch. And in Betty, she gives up Hambo so Simon can say goodbye to Betty. Much like with PB, BMO generally stayed within the same trajectory his character was being taken in Season 4. They really ramped up his cute, childlike innocence. I mean, at this point, he's basically just Finn and Jake's kid. This season gave us 2 more BMO-centric episodes. We got BMO Lost, an episode entirely from BMO's perspective, a la BMO Noir, and Be More, an episode exploring BMO's origins at the Mo Factory. As a whole, this was a pretty solid year for the little guy. He got a lot of cute moments. As you can probably tell based on my tone throughout this video, I'm pretty lukewarm on Season 5 as a whole. Don't get me wrong, it totally has its fair share of fantastic episodes and moments, as does every other season, and we'll totally get to said episodes when I do my top 10. But when so many of the episodes are just kind of dull, and the characters feel a lot more cold to each other, well, it sort of feels like the show was beginning to lose its touch, at least at the time anyway. Not to mention, a lot of the stuff they were doing with Finn this season was just really frustrating. But hey, it's not my least favorite season, that's the one we're discussing next time. But that's all just my opinion. Please let me know how you guys feel about Season 5 in the comments. And if you like my new character stills, then please check out my wonderful artist and friend, Keel. I would highly recommend all of you to check his work out. Seriously, he genuinely makes wonderful art and deserves so much more recognition for it. A link to his DeviantArt will be in the description and in my About page. Kirby, out.